I was reflecting this morning on pretty pervasive belief that humans have, and this gets translated, into the whole domain of spirituality. The same sort of, you could say, kind of fundamental idea, belief that we hold, and that is that we have to regulate somehow. This idea that we have to regulate our experience, we have to manage it in some way, we have to control it in some way, um, in order to achieve well-being, in order to realize, um, in order to realize a sense of well-being. And this idea goes, fairly unquestioned. I run into it all the time in my work with my graduate students, and where we're focused on exploring the question of human well-being and flourishing, in a psychological context. But the same thing um, applies here when we talk about our aspirations to realize the things we're often trying to realize in a spiritual context. Um, so I want to just, with that sort of idea in mind, I want to just invite you, just for these next few moments, to just relax um, and notice that rather extraordinary thing, that the things that we're searching for, or may feel as if we're searching for in a spiritual context, let's say, are already the case, that they're already here effortlessly. So that what this can reveal, is that the effort we make oftentimes to somehow manage experience, to try to transform experience, to try to shape it in a particular way that we imagine will reflect what it is we're looking for, that effort is not actually necessary at all, because what we're looking for is already present. So some examples of that we can just feel, we can feel the reality of this in our experience. So, and which can cut through this idea of somehow something has to change, something has to be different, something has to be done, something has to be transformed about what's here. So you may recall the famous book of Ram Dass's Be Here Now, which very much sounded like, and in many respects was, a kind of prescription for something to do, to engage in various things in order to be here now, right? So if we actually we sort of step outside of the personal perspective of being an individual trying to do something called being here now, and just notice life itself, notice the presence of reality itself. And this is precisely what reality is doing, without us as apparent individuals having to make effort to make that be the case. So reality is, isn't it? The moment is being, isn't it? Effortlessly. So the beingness of the moment is not something that we have to make effort to create. The beingness of the moment is here, spontaneously and effortlessly. The existence of now, the existence of this, is here without effort, isn't it? So how hard do we have to try to make that the case? We don't have to try at all. No effort is required. Being here, here. The here-ness, the presence, the here-ness of this is here, again, effortlessly, spontaneously. And the notion of now, of the immediacy of here, and now is also here effortlessly. This is exactly what's occurring in terms of reality itself, is being here now. Reality, life, existence, being here, present here, now. So we can just completely relax any effort to be here now, because we are being here now, aren't we? This is being here now. Of course, another thing that we've maybe been instructed or conditioned to believe takes effort in order to make it manifest, to make it present, to make it here, is this thing called awareness, called consciousness. Becoming more aware, becoming more awake, becoming more mindful, fill in the blank. And meanwhile, the knowing of the moment is inseparable from the knowing of the moment, isn't it? They're literally indivisible. The presence of the moment, the presence of this in all the different apparent shapes and forms the moment can take, is inseparable from the knowing of the moment. This is the knowing of the moment. And the knowing of this moment, the awareness of this moment, is effortless. Again, so the great relaxation in feeling that, the reality of that, the truth of this already present knowing, already present being, already present arising of the knowing of this moment. The moment is the arising of the knowing of this moment. This is the knowing of this moment, isn't it? It's just astonishing. It's just here inexplicably, here immediately, here without taking one step to make it here, without raising the tiniest little finger of effort to make this known, to make this present, right? To make this recognized. The light of knowing, this luminosity, is lit, right? It's lit. This is reality is illuminated, isn't it? Always. It's a light, the light of knowing, the light of consciousness, the light of sentience, of awareness. I mean, there's no words for it, obviously. The knowing of this is pervades the whole of experience, and it pervades the whole of experience inexplicably and effortlessly, without our having to do anything to make that, to crank up the light, turn on the light. It's already cranked up. It's already blazing forth the light. I remember many years ago kind of seeing that all these things that I had certainly read about in the different traditions that sounded like and seemed to be presented as prescriptions, ways of being more present, being more awake. They sound like prescriptions, directions for how to be, right? But really, what came to be seen is that they are descriptions of the way reality is, rather than prescriptions, at least from my standpoint. The moment is being and the moment is awake. That's a description, not a way that we have to be. It is just the way life is. That can be noticed, that can be recognized, clearly, and that's very much, what we're doing here is just recognizing what's here. It gets very interesting though, because even what we could call the non-recognition of that is the knowing of the moment. It's exactly the presence of the moment. We could say, though, that it would seem that the seeing of that, the recognition of that from a human standpoint, we could say, from a human perspective, feels beneficial somehow, is experienced as beneficial, as profoundly liberating and empowering and relaxing and nourishing somehow. I was writing one of my grad students yesterday about this, because they'd been kind of practicing meditation for many years, and I had introduced this perspective now that I'm sharing with you about that this is already here, that there's this presence of knowing that's already here, that's already making room for everything without our having to strive to become more aware or more open or more accepting. And this student was struggling to wrap their head around what I was talking about. And I shared with them the story I wrote about in my first book of when the journalist Bill Moyers was interviewing Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, about, what do you think the purpose of life is? Is what are humans looking for? I mean, and aren't they looking for a sense of meaningfulness? And Joseph Campbell said, I think what humans are looking for is a sense of being alive. They want to feel alive. And I remember thinking about that, reflecting on that, and like how curious that is in a way. I think you could say that's true. And then, there's a whole industry of kind of a self-help industry to help humans to feel a greater sense of aliveness and vitality. But meanwhile, aliveness and vitality is exactly what we have. It's already here. This is aliveness. This is vitality. This is the electric life that is present, just again, spontaneously and effortlessly. So that sense of aliveness we may be searching for is just the way reality is. So the search is not necessary. Another thing that we search for as humans is a greater sense of, we may feel constricted somehow or closed down in some ways. And then we aspire to open up, to be more open, to be more open-minded, more open-hearted, more open as beings. And it's a lovely aspiration, and it makes intuitive sense in a way that there's some intuition of like another way of being that is more open. And yet, if we look at reality itself, we can see that this openness is simply the way life is. So being open, again, is not something that has to be done by us, like take something closed and pry it open somehow through some technique. That's a misunderstanding. This is wide open. It can't be any more open. It's unbounded. If you feel experience, which of course we're always feeling experience, but just notice the felt sense of experience, and you won't find anything that we could call closed. You won't find anything that we call bounded. You won't find anything that we might describe as shut down. There's just this wide open expanse with nothing blocking anything else, just pure openness. So do we need to make effort to become open? No. Openness is just the way life is. complete openness. People talk about making effort to get more in the flow. Well, again, life is complete, endless flow, spontaneous, effortless flow. There's never a point where it gets stuck and stops flowing. Just look. I was writing the same student in this conversation. I was just describing about these different approaches to awareness. And I was talking in class to them about acceptance, which is a topic in psychology being talked a lot about. And I said, we can certainly try to become more aware and more allowing and more open and accepting of experience, moment to moment experience. I said, that's fine. But we can also look at the way life is and realize that life itself is the absolute master of those things that we're aspiring to create. In other words, we don't need to create the openness. We don't need to create the flow, because the flow is the way life is. Isn't it? It's so interesting, you know, that you know, that idea of like, I want to be spacious, you know, like the sky, to allow my experience to be as it is. You know, there'll be these spiritual practices to sort of imagine oneself as the openness in which everything is occurring. That's fine, and that can be a doorway into what I'm talking about, but just look and see that reality is pure openness, and everything is allowed spontaneously by reality, we could say. All the waves of phenomena that are occurring, arising, apparently, are radically allowed in the sense of, here they are. So that idea of like, something's rising and then I'm going to figure out some way through reading books and doing spiritual practices to be more accepting of what's here. It's like, no, just look at life. It has already made room for everything that's here. It is everything that's here. So it's, of course, made room for it. It's its expression. So we could call that a kind of radical allowing, a radical openness, a radical inclusivity and acceptance. Fair enough, one way to describe it, but here it is, already here. No effort required, right? You know, we seek, especially as spiritual seekers, we hear, you know, we're some, in some way or form, probably students of one kind of meditative tradition or yoga, and you know, the yoga, the idea of uniting, taking the separation and going beyond that and discovering, you know, the yoking together of the individual with God, or the soul with spirit, or Atman with Brahman, all these different ways of making effort to realize the union, the inseparability of reality. But reality is inseparable. Reality is indivisible. So where is the effort that's required to make that so? Well, there is no effort required. Reality is indivisible. We can feel that, actually. That's just feel the moment, the flow of experience. And there's no, as I often point out, there's no gaps anywhere. There's no dividing lines. So this is the indivisibility here that is here effortlessly and spontaneously, whether we're doing some practice to realize it or not. It's just the way things are, indivisible, inseparable. We engage in various practices and read books about and go to seminars about becoming more present. And yet reality, again, is the presence of what's here, is present effortlessly, isn't it? This moment is here. This is the presence. This is the presence that doesn't require practice and that can't go away. So it's not something that can be gained or lost. through any measure of effort or control or manipulation of reality. It's just life being present, reality being present. That is its nature, is to be present, isn't it? Feel that. Feel the way in which presence never goes anywhere, even as it is constantly transforming itself, apparently, appearing in different garbs, different forms that the presence seems to take on and assume. But all the while, regardless of how the forms may be appearing and how they may be being described, there's just this presence. And we don't have to, contrary to the kind of habitual human conditioning, be it more just ordinary or in a spiritual context, we don't have to micromanage what's present in order to become present, because what's present is present. So do you see what I mean? It's like the waves don't need to be manipulated, because they are the upwelling, the arising of reality itself. So they are the presence. Why would we need to manipulate them in order to become present? If I had to encapsulate like these two approaches to well-being, or if you want some kind of spiritual realization, again, put it in that kind of context if you want to. The two approaches can be summed up in this way, that the well-being is found by regulating my experiences and having more of the ones that I deem to be reflective of well-being or spiritual realization, right? That's the ordinary approach that we're most familiar with, most humans. And this other approach is that the very appearance of all of those phenomena, experiential phenomena, are the well-being. I mean, the ground of being, the source of everything, the divinity, the intelligence that gives rise to all of this, God, if you will. I mean, whatever you want to call the basic state of everything, everything that arises, if we liken that to an ocean, a vast, boundless ocean of reality, or the ground, or whatever you want to call it, of God, everything that is appearing is an upwelling of that basic state, an upwelling of reality, isn't it? Just like the wave is simply an upwelling of ocean, an appearance of a way in which the ocean can express, can show up as, can shine forth as. And so this is why, again, the waves of experience nothing needs to be done about them. I mean, we can do things. We have that's another perspective, to arrange our lives in such a way. I call this, the first approach to well-being, where we arrange our lives in such a way as to have more of the things that we enjoy and less of the things that we don't enjoy as much. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not discounting that as a valid perspective on realizing a certain kind of flourishing and well-being. But then there's this other this other discovery that all of this is the well of being. All of this is the ground of being. Every experience, every circumstance, every thought, feeling, sensation, ultimately inseparable from its ground, inseparable from its basis. So we don't need to create what already exists, this well of being. It exists as each instant of life. Here for a less than a nanosecond, and yet flowing continuously as what we might call the flow of time, the flow of life, the flow of moment to moment reality. The ease and equanimity that we also seek as search after as seekers often is that, again, the very nature of reality is completely at ease, simply being itself, with no argument with itself. It is itself, being itself in all of its forms. Complete ease and equanimity, isn't it? Nothing we have to accomplish, nothing we have to make effort to create ease and equanimity. The flow of moment to moment reality unfolding inexplicably, spontaneously, effortlessly. That very flow is pure ease, pure peace, pure stability. Stability in the sense of it's always itself, even though it's always changing. What utter stability, the stability of this can never depart from itself. This always is itself, always being itself.